will please put yourselves on mute for the duration of our session today. And should you have questions, please type them into the chat box. And these will be noted and addressed during our question and answer forum at the end of the presentation. As the moderator, I will be the one to ask these questions for you. Before we proceed, let me introduce the CFBCI. It was founded in January 1998 and in 2018 celebrated its 20th anniversary. It is one of the most prominent nonprofit organizations in the Filipino-Chinese community, with membership of more than 400 individuals and growing. These members come from the finance, manufacturing, real estate development, travel and tourism, fuel, chemical, hardware, construction, banking, and other sectors who are the creme de la creme of the Sino-Filipino community. We are very happy to be a part of the impact that the CFBCI creates. So at this point, let me pause and we will show a video for you to learn more about CFBCI.
As one of the most prominent nonprofit organizations in the Filipino-Chinese community, focusing on community service and trade advocacy, for the past 22 years, Chinese-Filipino Business Club has been a continuing partner of the Filipinos in uplifting the lives of our less fortunate brothers and sisters in their day-to-day life, education, and livelihood. To mention a few of CFBCI's projects, for education, CFBCI has continuously provided short and long-term education assistance through the following programs: Pagharap sa Pangarap Scholarship Program and Mobile Computer Study Program. Bahay Pag-asa Phase 1 and 2, CFBCI heeds to the call of Marawi. In cooperation with Tarlac Heritage Foundation, and in support of President Duterte's vision of providing immediate shelter and accommodation for residents displaced by war in Marawi. A total of 110 units of houses were built for the people of Marawi. Medical mission and assistance during calamities. During this COVID-19 pandemic, as people throughout the countries are struggling to access food supply during the lockdown, CFBCI, through its Operation Brotherhood project, distributed a total of 110,000 kilos of rice and 21,000 packs of relief goods in cooperation with the different local LGUs. CFBCI created the MSME Center, Micro, Small, Medium Enterprise, which aims to assist people from the middle and lower strata of the society to establish small businesses and boost the concept of development of micro, small, and medium enterprise through free seminars on basic entrepreneurship. As the new normal kicks in, CFBCI shifted its assistance to the business community by hosting webinars to provide guidance to businesses and upcoming entrepreneurs while staying in the safety of their own places. For those who would like to know more about CFBCI, visit us at www.cfbci.ph for more information.
Thank you. So that's really an awesome impact that CFBCI creates in our society and also becoming relevant at this time of the pandemic. At this point, we'd like to call on our president, Mr. Alejandro Ko, the incumbent president of CFBCI, for his welcome message.
Pero Rani, our distinguished resource speaker, Attorney Ivy Grace Villarsoto, fellow CFBCI officers and members, participants of today's webinar, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar on Data Privacy Act of 2012. Today, webinar is partly different from the past of 4 webinars we have presented. Topic on data privacy law are company duties and obligations in connection with data privacy and managing our data, as well as the unlawful processing of data, will be tackled by the Authority on Data Privacy, Attorney Villasoto. As businessmen, part of our business is having a secure data processing system that will ensure a smooth flow of business free from fraud, such as unauthorized transfer and the like, especially during this pandemic where suspicious call, email asking for some information are very rampant. It is, it is a must that we must take advantage of this webinar to know what we need to be done in case we need to attend on some data privacy matters that may arise. Like with our previous webinar, we believe that it could be a great help and is very timely during this trying time when our business resilience is put into the test. Thank you, and may we have a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Ko, for that welcome address. Shall we now call upon our Executive Vice President, Mr. Stephen Sia, to introduce our guest speaker for today?
Good afternoon, friends of Chinese Filipino Business Club. Our speaker this afternoon is Ivy Grace. He's the officer in charge, director of the Privacy Policy Office of the National Privacy Commission, an independent body mandated to administer and implement the Data Privacy Act of 2012 and to monitor and to ensure the compliance of the country with international standards set for data protection. She joined the Commission in October 2016. She obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree, major in Public Administration from the University of the Philippines in 2004, and her Bachelor of Law degree from the Far Eastern University in 2009. She has been in the practice of law since 2010. Prior to joining the Commission, she was the Director for Tax Service at SGV and Company. Without further ado, friends, please join me and welcome our speaker and give the floor to our speaker, Attorney Ivy Grace Villasoto.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting the NPC in this seminar. So I'll just start my presentation. So I hope everyone is seeing my screen. So now I'll provide an overview of the Data Privacy Act of 2012, some of the important provisions under the law, salient terms, key terms, and to know your obligations as companies under the law, as well as to know your rights as data subjects under the DPA. So as we know, a lot of our transactions now are being done online. Especially now during the pandemic and during our community quarantines, a lot has really shifted towards the digital platforms in doing business, in getting our basic needs. So with this, we have to be aware of our obligations as companies under the Data Privacy Act. we also have to be aware as data subjects of our rights under the law, especially now that Filipinos are very heavy users of social media. There was a survey, I think 2 years ago, that more than 95% of Filipinos use social media, have a Facebook account, and of that 95%, more than one-third uses social media for more than 3 hours in a day. So a lot of our daily waking lives are being spent online, and we share information, we share our personal information, and we do not know that sometimes sharing these online can be very risky. That's why we have to know the risks involved when we do that. So I'll just share a short video just to illustrate what I'm saying. I hope the sound is coming.
Dag Fien. Dus telefoon. Ik zie een school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja,
Insecten.
dat blieft?
Ik voel 2 insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenië?
Zo hè.
Een moto. Oranje.
Pas erop.
Zenit.
Oui, oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de...
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
De vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is het met je spierscheur? Een maison rouge, balkon, blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Die staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
9-7. Last month, you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8,
Ja.
5 voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, maar eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh nee. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
So as you saw in that short video, a lot of personal information are being shared online in social media, and a lot of the people doing this are not aware of the risks when they do that. If you remember a few years back, meron pong teacher na kakapasa lang niya sa licensure exam, tapos pinost po niya yung kanyang PRC license na nakuha sa PRC. Tapos a few months after, nalaman na lang niya, meron po siyang mga outstanding loans with several banks na hindi po siya naglo-loan. So it would seem na dahil pinost po niya yung kanyang PRC license online, di ba may mga detalye po doon, nandun yung name niya, signature, yung kanyang license number, that was used, those pieces of information were used to enable identity fraud. Kaya nakapag-loan po yung ibang tao in his name. So, kaya nga po, ito pong right to privacy, ito po yung karapatan natin ng isang individual na makontrol yung collection, yung access, kung paano ginagamit yung personal information niya. So, either ginagamit ng gobyerno or ginagamit ng private sector companies. We have a law, it's the Data Privacy Act of 2012. As seen here, it's an act protecting individual personal information in information and communication systems, both in the government and the private sector. Now, this law created the National Privacy Commission. You may be wondering, it's 2012 na law, but it seems na we've just heard about this last year lang siguro or 2 years lang. kasi po the National Privacy Commission, yung leader po namin si Commissioner Liboro, the Privacy Commissioner was just appointed in 2016. And also the 2 deputies were just appointed. The first set were just appointed in 2016. That's why yung full implementation, kumbaga, and the implementing rules and regulations, lumabas lang po siya noong 2016. Actually, 4 years na po ang NPC. So since 2016, we've been involved in mostly public education activities, and also kasi po dahil ang scope ng batas is nationwide po siya, hindi lang po within the Philippines pala, it also involves extraterritorial application. So we've been focusing on public education for the past 4 years or so. Ang next po namin is compliance naman, and the next following years would be enforcement. Pakita ko lang po, ito po yung current leaders ng NPC. So at the middle is Commissioner Raymond Enriquez Liboro, and then he has 2 deputy privacy commissioners, Attorney Leandro Aguirre and Attorney John Naga. As mentioned, the law, it doesn't apply just sa Philippines. It has extraterritorial application. So meaning it may also apply in certain instances when processing is done even outside of the country. So ang mga necessary or mga nag-uusap-usap dito sa batas na to would be us, the National Privacy Commission as the regulator, then those companies who process personal data, and also syempre po ang mga tao, ang mga data subjects whose data is being processed. So we've been very actually fortunate na na-mention po kami ang data privacy sa SONA, sa recent SONA ni President Duterte. It's a recognition talaga na siguro po dahil nga biglang nag-shift lahat on digital platforms, biglang nagkaroon ng realization po siguro na kailangan na talaga ma-enforce strictly ang data protection ng consumer laws, ang privacy laws natin. So we have to know certain key terms under the Data Privacy Act to fully understand kung ano ba talaga yung coverage, ano ba yung nilalaman ng batas na to. We have personal information, we have sensitive personal information. So magkaiba po yung terms na yan. We have to know yung difference kasi kapag sensitive personal information po ang involved in case of a complaint or a breach, mas mataas po yung penalty under the law. So ang personal information, kung may Venn diagram po tayo, yung personal information would be the bigger circle, and then inside that would be the sensitive personal information. So personal information would be any information which can identify you as a person. So usually your name, your mobile number, your address, email address. Pero syempre baka po may kapangalan ka. So pag pinag-combine po yan at na-identify ang isang tao, yun po personal information po yun. Now, on the other side naman, ito po yung, there's a specific listing under the law of what are sensitive personal information. So, included po dyan yung race, ethnic origin, marital status. So, marital status po is sensitive. Age is sensitive. Also, your religion, your educational records, your health records, yung pong mga specific numbers which are issued to you by the government, which is peculiar to an individual. Lahat po yan, like your PIN, your passport number, your SSS number, all of those are sensitive personal information. So, di ba po parang freely binibigay lang natin yan minsan sa social media or binibigay lang natin yan when we sign up for a service. But we have to be aware na yung mga pieces of data na yan are sensitive. It could be used against us. It could be used for identity theft. So, dapat po, every time we give out information, kung maaari po talaga, basahin po natin yung terms and conditions, basahin po natin yung privacy notice nila, just to know how they are going to use that data. So data subject, ito naman po a term, lahat po tayo ay data subjects. So all human beings, all natural persons are data subjects. Hindi po data subject yung mga companies or yung mga juridical persons. So ang pinoprotektahan po under the Data Privacy Act would be data subjects like mga empleyado, mga kliyente, any stakeholder, any consumer, any subscriber, patients, yan po, lahat po yan data subjects. So kapag data po ng corporation, hindi po siya protected under the Data Privacy Act. It may be protected under a separate law. Pero ang pinoprotektahan po under the DPA would be individual personal data or sensitive personal information. So sino po itong Personal Information Controller or PIC? A PIC could be any entity, it could be any person who processes personal data. So meaning yung gobyerno, mga ospital, schools, banks, the telcos, the malls, any person. So also even yung wala pong brick and mortar presence, yung mga nakikita lang po natin online, mga apps, yan po, lahat po yan ay mga personal information controllers. So meaning these entities or these persons or individuals, even our professional doctors, halimbawa, or mga lawyers, when they process personal data, kasi sila po ang nagdedetermine ng purpose, sila ang nagdetermine ng means, kung bakit nila pinoprocess, sila ang may control, kaya ang tawag po sa kanila ay personal information controllers. So ito po, in-exclude po nito yung mga tao or mga na nagpo-process lang ng personal information in connection with his or her family, personal family or household affairs. Another term would be personal information processor, so PIP. Ito naman po, yung mga entities or mga tao na kung kanino naka-outsource yung processing. So if you remember, mga 2 years ago po ata, lumabas sa news yun sa DFA. Si DFA po ang personal information controller with respect to our passport data. Pero yung pagpiprint, actual printing ng DFA or pagpuproduce, naka-outsource po yun to another entity, a third-party service provider. So yung third-party po na yun, siya po yung PIP natin. So ganun din po sa mga companies nyo. If you outsource any personal data processing, malimbawa kayo po yung mga HR functions nyo naka-outsource, yun po, kung kanino po siya in-outsource at nagpo-process po siya ng personal information, that's called a PIP. A PIP, similar to PICs, they also have obligations under the Data Privacy Act of 2012. Okay, so outsourcing. No processing. Ano po ba yung processing? Kasi kanina pa sinasabi, ang coverage ng law is processing of personal data. So processing is basically anything you can do with data. So the moment na makollect nyo yan, hanggat ma-destroy nyo, yung data life cycle na yun po yung processing. So halimbawa po, halimbawa po for the doctors, halimbawa na may clinics or the hospitals, or any business na nagpo-process ng personal data, may empleyado ka, halimbawa, from the 1980s at nandyan pa rin yung data niya sa storage nyo, sa steel cabinet nyo. So storage po kasi is under the definition of processing. So hanggat hindi nyo pa dinidestroyan or sineshred, kasama pa rin po yun sa term na processing. Ang Data Privacy Act po pala, nag-a-apply siya both sa mga online tsaka sa mga hard copies, halimbawa na data, mga papel, so or manual system. So nag-a-apply po siya doon. So ang ina-expect po ng NPC is that merong reasonable and appropriate measures to protect kung ano po yung klaseng processing meron po kayo. So ano ba yung mga obligations under the law? Essentially, we expect, the National Privacy Commission expects na any processing activity would adhere to the data privacy principles. So meaning transparent, may legitimate purpose, and proportional. Transparency, paano po ba natin nakikita or how is transparency demonstrated? It's usual po, it's through a privacy notice. If mapapansin niyo po yan in websites or when you download apps, meron pong maliit-maliit na pwede pong maklik doon sa somewhere sa interface ng isang website or ng isang app na privacy notice. This notice just informs you in general terms on how that company or that website processes personal data. Usually written siya na sobrang haba, parang terms and conditions. Kaya yung ibang jurisdictions, ang ginawa nila, hindi siya written. Naka-video format siya or parang naka-cartoons. Kasi may studies din po in other jurisdictions na hindi talaga binabasa yung privacy notice. So tayo po, para ma-engage natin yung ating mga customers, mga clients, mga stakeholders, mas maganda na kung kakayanin, hindi lang po yung plain na notice. Pero syempre, dahil kung yung iba po nagsisimula pa lang sa compliance nila with the Data Privacy Act, okay na din po yung written na notice or notice in the website. A privacy notice or a privacy statement. Yung iba po ang tawag, data privacy policy. I think mapapansin nyo din po in other, sa mga brick and mortar stores din, sa mga malls, or mga restaurants po, yung iba po meron na din privacy notice, or sa mga hotels, dun po sa mga concierge nila, meron na pong nakatayo doon, may estante na privacy notice. So yun po, makikita na po natin sa ilang mga establishments. So, for legitimate purpose, kasi po ang processing natin has to have some basis, a lawful basis, a basis which is not contrary to law. Under Section 12, ito po yung mga posibleng basis for processing natin. So, pipili lang po ang isang kumpanya kung ano ba, saan ba pumapasok yung processing ko. It could be based on consent, it could be based on contract, or based on legal obligation kung may batas po na nag-require sa inyo na mag-submit, magpasa ng ganitong requirement, pero it would involve personal information. So, allowed po kayong gawin yon. Or ito po, to fulfill functions of a public authority, kapag may national emergency for public order and safety, or legitimate interest ng isang kumpanya. Pwede din po siyang maging basis for processing. Pero ito pong legitimate interest, itong the last criterion, this should be balanced with the rights and freedoms of data subjects. Kasi medyo catch-all po siya kung titingnan natin, no? Pero the idea here is that yung legitimate interest, halimbawa may legitimate business interest, ang isang kumpanya, sabihin niya, hindi na ako kukuha ng consent, I'll just rely on my legitimate interest as a business to process personal data. For example, direct marketing. Iniisip mo, hindi ako kukuha ng consent, ano na lang, magma-mass text na lang ako or mass email blast ng aking advertisement. Pwede naman siguro yon under legitimate interest. Total, name and email lang naman ang ipoprocess ko. So magkakaroon po dapat kayo dyan ng assessment na kung mas matimbang po ba yung legitimate business interest nyo vis-a-vis the rights and freedoms of data subjects. Under Section 13, ito naman po yung processing ng sensitive personal information. So meron din pong consent based on existing law or regulation. Ito po for lawful rights and interest in court proceedings, establishment of legal claims. So ito po ay mag-aaring basis for processing sensitive personal information. Usually po pag government processing, syempre po lagi po siyang based on a law or regulation. Kaya hindi po tayo humihingi ng consent kapag based on law. So ito po yung question pala, is consent always needed? Siyempre po hindi. Madami po kasi a lot of stakeholders are asking, how do we get consent? Tapos nahihirapan daw silang kumuha ng consent. It's because siguro consent is not the appropriate basis for the processing. Kaya nahihirapan kumuha ng consent. We must remember na consent is just one of the listed possible basis for processing. Companies should choose kung ano yung pinaka-appropriate dun sa nature ng relationship ng individual sa inyo kung bakit nyo pinoprocess yung personal data niya. Proportionality, ito sinasabi lang dito na dapat when you process, dapat yung sakto lang. So it's adequate, it's relevant, suitable, necessary, and not excessive to the purpose. Kasi ano po yun, parang ang nangyayari po kasi dahil meron na siyang feeling niya, ito na na-collect ako na nasa form naman, so i-collect ko na lang lahat. Hindi po pwede yon. Dapat dapat po ngayon we re-evaluate our forms, our data collection forms kung necessary ba talaga lahat. Ito po, I think baka nakita niyo na tong picture na to sa social media. Ito daw po para makautang sa isang sari-sari store, ito yung mga hinihingi. Di ba ang dami-dami? It's no longer proportional. Mas matindi pa po yung hinihingi niya kaysa sa hinihingi ng mga bangko for purposes of KYC or know your customer. So ito po, example po ito na hindi nagfa-follow sa proportionality principle. Kasi hindi na po siya proportional to the purpose. Baka ang messaging po dito is wag na lang kayong umutang sa akin dahil ang dami-dami kong hinihingi requirements. And also, companies must uphold data subject rights. Ito po, may listing under the law kung ano-ano po ang mga rights ng data subject. So, we have the right to be informed, we have the right to object. So informed kasi i-connect po natin to dun sa transparency. We have the right to object. Pwede po tayong mag-object kapag processing is based on consent. So pwede po nating sabihin na, wini-withdraw ko na yung consent ko. It's possible po na ganun. We have the right to access, right to correct, right to erase. Yung right to erase is not the same but very similar po dun sa rights under the GDPR, yung right to be forgotten. We have the right to damages, right to data portability. So ito po, data portability gives you more control over your data. So halimbawa po, you're a subscriber of telco. Yun po, ang example po dito yung number portability law. Parang similar po siya doon. Yung pwede kang lumipat from one telco to another, ihingin mo yung data mo, lilipat mo sa kabila. So ganun po yung idea ng data portability. And also the right to file a complaint. We also have to implement technical, organizational, technical, and physical security measures. So itong measures na to would really depend kung ano po at paano nyo pinoprocess yung data, manual systems ba yan or online ba yan, etc. Or ano lang po, nakalak lang ba yan sa cabinet. So depende po talaga kung how you process the personal data. Nagde-depend din po yung reasonable and appropriate measures to protect the data. These are the 5 pillars of data privacy and accountability and compliance. So essentially, yan po yung ine-expect ng National Privacy Commission for all personal information controllers and processors. So you have to have a data protection officer, you conduct your privacy impact assessments, you create a PMP, privacy management program, you implement security measures, and you are ready in case of a breach. So on DPO, Data Protection Officer, sino po ba or ano po ba yung Data Protection Officer? A Data Protection Officer, this is a person who is accountable to ensure na a company, a government agency, for example, or any person processing personal data is compliant with the Data Privacy Act. So halimbawa po for individual doctors halimbawa or practicing na mga lawyers, siya na po mismo yung de facto data protection officer kung wala naman po siyang staff. Pero for bigger companies, pwede pong mag-appoint or mag-designate ng isang individual to be accountable for compliance. Ito po yung ginagawa ng isang data protection officer. So monitor compliance, ensure the conduct of privacy impact assessment, ensure that rights are respected. Pero essentially, siya po yung hinahanap ng National Privacy Commission in case lang there's a complaint or in case there's a compliance check or in case there's a breach. Yun po. Siya po yung contact person na doon na kumbaga siya yung privacy officer doon sa loob ng kumpanya, ensuring that the provisions of the DPA are being followed. Meron din pong registration requirement under the issuances of the National Privacy Commission. So, sino pong required mag-register? So, if a company has at least 250 employees or processes at least 1,000 sensitive personal information of at least 1,000 data subjects, or letter C, processing is likely to pose a risk to the rights and freedoms of the data subject, or processing is not occasional. So, yung C and D, medyo vague. So, ang nangyari po, ginawa po ng NPC, nag-identify kami ng sectors na ito yung mandatory has to register based on C and D. So pag gobyerno ka, pag bank, pag telco, BPOs, schools, hospitals, insurance, direct marketing, pharmaceutical companies engaged in research, and kapag ikaw ay PIP or naka-outsource sa'yo itong mga ginagawa ng mga naunang PICs, you're required to register. Registration po could be done online, kaya lang the forms po kaya kailangan ipa-notarize. So, I'm not quite sure, hindi ko po na-check with our compliance and monitoring division if na-waive ba yung notarization requirement because of the community quarantines now. But for further information, pwede nyo pong i-check sa aming website kung paano yung how to register or I want to register, meron po doon under our services. Pwede nyo pong maklik dyan. So, implementing privacy and data protection measures. Yun po kasi kailangan talaga mag-implement tayo ng reasonable and appropriate OTP, organizational, technical, and physical security measures. So ito po, as a company, dapat meron na po tayo, or at least simulan na po, we should start making policies on the use of email, on any paper-based filing system, access control. So syempre, palimbawa po for your HR files, dapat si HR lang or kung sino man po yung authorized person lang ang may access. Hindi po pwedeng yung buong kumpanya ay uma-access doon sa mga ganong ka-sensitive halimbawa po ng mga files. Itong acceptable use policy, halimbawa po nag-issue po tayo ng company phones or company laptops or computers. So dapat meron po tayo acceptable use policy. Alam po dapat ng employees natin kung paano lang or saan lang pwedeng gamitin yung mga office issued na mga devices. On bring your own device, siguro po hindi masyado tong issue ngayon dahil malamang po or madami po ang naka-work from home. Pero yung dati po, there are companies na hindi pinapayagan yung bring your own device kasi security risk siya kung kumakabit yung isang device which is from outside of the organization. So dapat po siguro kung eventually po bumalik na po tayong lahat sa mga offices natin, not just the skeleton workforce, meron din po dapat tayong policies on bring your own device. Also policies on confidentiality, on storage, on retention and disposal of any personal data which we process. Also on technical security measures, the NPC expects po na meron po tayong some sort of encryption na nangyayari. It must be personal data that are processed must be encrypted at rest and in transit. Ang require po is, or ang recommend as the most appropriate standard would be yung AES 256. So, hindi po ako IT professional, so hindi ko din po ma-explain sa inyo masyado kung ano po yung AES 256, pero ito po yung standard with respect to encryption. On passwords, so dapat meron din po tayong password policy. I think naman pag mga for Microsoft and yung po mga usual po natin ginagamit ng mga processing software, meron po usually pinoprompt naman tayo lagi na every 60 days or 90 days, pinagpapalit po tayo ng password, etc. So dapat meron din po tayo internally na may reminders tayo to our employees na palitan yung password sa emails, palitan yung password sa mga, kahit po sa mga social media accounts para sure po tayo na, it would deter password attacks. So ito po, ayon sa Security Magazine, these are the worst passwords of 2019. Admittedly, guilty din po ako dito sa mga paggamit ng 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yung mga umuulit-ulit na mga numbers and letters. Yan po on the worst passwords. A lot also use yung date of birth nila, date of birth ng anak or ng asawa, or yung names ng mga anak, ng pets, etc. So yun po yung mga gano'n na sana po medyo random na password yung gamitin natin. Kasi po pag mga gano'n na talagang connected sa inyo, personal information ng malapit sa inyo, it's possible po kasi based on social engineering or sa phishing or what have you na mga ginagawa po ng mga hackers na pwede pong makuha or ma-social engineer from you yung password nyo. So sabi din po sa aming issuance, but this is for the government, pero probably maging sana sundin na din po ng private sector, na huwag na po tayong gumamit ng fax machine when we transmit personal data, documents containing personal data. So physical security measures, kasi madami pa rin naman pong gumagamit ng manual paper-based systems, dapat lang din po ma-monitor natin and ma-limit yung access to activities in the area where personal data processing is taking place. So also yung design ng offices natin, dapat po yung hindi nasisilip from the back yung mga monitors ng mga employees natin. Kasi yun po yung parang pwedeng matingnan kung ano yung nangyayari sa screen. So yung design ng office space and the work and the physical arrangement should also take into account data privacy. So we have to have policies and procedures for the destruction of files, and i-secure po natin yung room or yung workstation against natural disasters, external access and other similar threats where applicable. Ito po yung lagi namin din sinasabi na sana before we implement or when we decide to implement any new system involving personal data, sana po dapat privacy by design. Meaning, at the very beginning pa lang, inisip na natin yung privacy considerations. Kasi halimbawa po before tayo mag-start, nagpa-privacy impact assessment muna tayo. It's an assessment on the risks, hindi po ng risk sa company ha, it's risk on the person, risk on the data subjects whose personal data will be processed in this system. Ganun po natin titingnan yung privacy impact assessment. Meron na din pong privacy by design na standard under the ISO. I think ito po yung 29,100 na standard. Very similar. Ito po yung pinaprescribe po doon is very similar kung ano yung nakasulat sa Data Privacy Act natin. So, consent and choice, collection limitation, so proportionality, data minimization, proportionality. Ito po, openness, transparency, access, accountability, accuracy. Very similar po yung ine-expect under this ISO with vis-a-vis our Data Privacy Act of 2012. Ito po, siguro po, for those companies, baka po nagbabalak na, syempre dahil online na nga lahat nag-develop ng mga apps, moving towards or shifting towards a digital platform in relation to the privacy by design. Ito lang, meron lang po akong short video again to illustrate lang ito pong use of the apps.
Det ser lækkert ud. Så skal jeg lige bede om de sidste 5 sms'er, du har sendt.
Hvad for noget? Mit telefonnummer? Nej, hvad skal jeg? Så vil jeg også have dit. Det skal I ikke.
Nej.
Nej, på min næste. Nej, jeg vil ikke have.
Jeg sendte det til min søster.
Ja, hvad er søsterens nummer?
Jeg vil da ikke udgive hendes telefonnummer til nogen. Det lover jeg dig, jeg ikke vil. Jeg udleverer ikke nogens uden tilladelse.
Så skal jeg lige høre, hvor du var i går kl. 8.
Så var jeg hjemme hos mine forældre.
Har du deres telefonnummer samtidig?
Ja, det får du heller ikke.
Hej, jeg går bare lige med jer.
Nå, okay.
Bare se, hvor I skal hen.
Nå, okay. Det er lidt mærkeligt, det her. Nå, men vi skal derover.
Ja, så er vi bare det. 13 kroner, og så skal jeg lige bede om de telefonnummer.
Hvorfor det?
Jamen, det er helt standard herinde, for at give dig en bedre service.
Det har jeg ikke lyst til at give.
Så skal jeg bede om din e-mailadresse i stedet for.
Det har jeg heller ikke lyst til at give. Jeg vil bare gerne have en bolle, og så smukt.
Jeg skal bare lige høre, hvor du var henne i går kl. 8.
If companies po, or if your companies are thinking of developing apps, as you can see, di ba po, parang a lot of apps po kasi ngayon, online applications, require permissions. Madami po humihingi ng access to your camera, to your photo gallery, access to your contacts. Meron pong definition yung Android, and I think yung Apple may definition po, or the Android pala, may definition kung ano yung mga dangerous permissions. If you notice po last year, there was a spike dun sa online lending apps. Madami pong nag-avail ng loans using this online lending apps. Tapos apparently, nagkakaroon po ng access yung apps sa contacts nyo. Tapos when the person fails to pay, ang nangyari po, kinokontak lahat nung nasa phone book. tapos tinetext, tinatawagan, sinasabi na, si person ABC, hindi nagbabayad ng utang niya, etc. So, ang dami pong nakuhang complaints ng National Privacy Commission with respect to that. So, kayo po, dapat very aware kayo, specifically as a data subject, aware kayo when you download these apps. Siguraduhin nyo na talagang ready kayong ibigay yung ganong klaseng permission. I-evaluate nyo, kailangan ba niya talagang ma-access yung camera ko? Kailangan ba niyang ma-access yung phone contacts ko? So, kailangan nyo po talagang i-evaluate yun. Tapos, tingnan nyo kung ta-download nyo ba talaga yung app or hindi. And when you develop naman po, kung kayo po ay businesses that will develop apps, as mentioned, dapat you have privacy by design at the very beginning pa lang talaga, na siguro i-limit na talaga yung kung ano yung mga permissions na gusto nyo i-request from your subscribers, from your data subjects. Kung hindi siya necessary, don't collect it na lang, kasi the more that you collect, the higher your risk. Kasi the next slides would discuss breach management. Kasi po, the more that you collect, the more that you have to protect. Tapos, pag mas madami kayong kino-collect, the higher your risk for a personal data breach. So, ano nga ba yung data breach? What is a personal data breach? It's a breach of security leading to the accidental or unlawful destruction, loss, alteration, unauthorized disclosure or access to personal data that is transmitted, stored, or otherwise processed. If you remember, noong 2016, na breach po yung COMELEC. So, yun yung pinakamalaki. Hindi lang po sa Philippines ata, pero one of the biggest data breaches in the world. Kasi ilan po ang voters, diba, ng buong Pilipinas. So, nakuha po yung voter data natin. Nakuha din po doon yung data ng mga nag-apply for gun ban exemption. So, ang dami pong nakuha doon sa COMELEC breach na yun. Ang question na lang po kasi ngayon is kung hindi kung mabibreach ka. It's a question of when will it happen. Kasi talagang nag-iba na po yung milieu ngayon. Talagang rampant na itong mga personal data breaches. Tapos, kailangan lang talaga nating maging handa to mitigate the risks in case na mangyari na nga ito sa atin. So, ano ba yung nature of a personal data breach? So, it could be availability breach, it could be integrity or confidentiality. Availability yung nawala, na-destroy yung personal data. Integrity na bago yung data. Or confidentiality, may ibang taong naka-access na hindi siya authorized to access. So, yan po yung mga personal data breaches. Under the law and the IRR and issuances of the NPC, meron po tayong mga notification requirements. So, nagkaroon ng breach that involves sensitive personal information or any information which will enable identity fraud. It was accessed by an unauthorized person. And the acquisition will likely give rise to a real risk of serious harm to a data subject. Kailangan po natin mag-notify sa NPC at sa affected data subjects. Kailan po yung notification? It's within 72 hours from knowledge that from reasonable belief that a personal data breach has occurred. So kung ano po ang alam natin within 72 hours, i-report po natin yan sa NPC. So ito po, may template naman po in our website kung ano yung pwede nyo ilagay or dapat ilagay sa notification sa NPC. Meron din pong template ng notification sa data subjects. Yung notification to the data subjects, it's possible na pwede po tayo mag-ask ng exemption to the notification. Meron lang pong conditions kung kailan mag-a-apply yung exemption. So, form of notification, pwede pong hard copy, pwedeng through email, i-email po natin siya sa breach@privacy.gov.ph. Tapos, meron din po tayong annual report. Ito parang ano lang siya, tally lang siya ng mga security incidents. Syempre po, internally sa inyo, kailangan nyo pong i-document yun. Dapat meron po kayong ready na report just in case ma-compliance check kayo or just in case may mag-complain. Pero yung annual report po sa NPC on the security incidents which are not the security incidents and personal data breaches, sinasubmit po yung annual report. Online din po yata yun. So, I think I'm not sure, quite sure kung nakasuspend or live po yung link for submitting the annual report. I would have to check with our compliance and monitoring division. So ito po essentially yung A to Z 1 to 10 na data privacy, accountability, and compliance framework. Alam ko madami pong kailangan gawin. Ang sinasabi po namin is compliance with the Data Privacy Act is a journey. So we're here, the NPC is here to assist you in your compliance journey. So madami po sa mga companies naman na malalaki halimbawa, kasi baka nag-start sila noong 2012 pa nung lumabas yung batas. So baka medyo ready na sila or nakumpleto na nila itong compliance framework na to. But for those na hindi pa nakakasimula or magsisimula pa lang, okay lang po yun. Hindi naman po namin i-expect na lahat ay naka-comply na. Alam po namin na madami pa rin po yung kakadinig pa lang sa Data Privacy Act. So ito po yung expectation down the road kung ginagawa ng ating mga companies na nagpo-process ng personal data. So on updates sa COVID and vis-a-vis data privacy matters, ito po, na ano po talaga kami dito sa mga news on COVID, madalas po nami-mention ang NPC vis-a-vis yung contact tracing, etc. So ito po yung mga list ng aming public health emergency bulletins. Available po siya sa website. So parang simula pa lang po, even before tayo nag-lockdown or nag-community quarantines, nung nandun pa lang po tayo sa pwede bang kunin yung mga airline manifests. Nandun pa lang yung, simula pa lang, mga Feb pa lang ata yun. Nung nag-start kami mag-issue ng bulletins. And until now, nag-update po kami ng mga FAQs and the security measures to be done by personal information controllers and processors. So, ito po talaga yung mantra, kumbaga, with respect to the COVID-19 response. So, collect what is necessary, disclose only to the proper authority. We have to remember na yung COVID-19, yung the fact na suspect ka or probable or confirmed case ka, health data po yun. So, sensitive personal information siya. So, hindi lang po DPA ang nag-a-apply. Nag-a-apply din po yung RA 11332, yung Notifiable Diseases Law. Nag-a-apply po ang mga DOH issuances. Very lately po, nag-i-issue na din po ang DTI and DOLE with respect to going back to your workplaces. So, lahat po yun nag-a-apply ng mga batas and mga issuances on the COVID-19 response. So here, even in a state of public health emergency, rules on patient privacy, confidentiality of health records, medical ethics, and data subjects' right remain in effect, and upholding them equate to protecting lives. So if you've heard nung mga April or May po ata yun, doon nag-start na parang pag nalaman na nag-COVID positive yung family, halimbawa, or yung may nakatirang COVID positive sa particular na bahay na to, in the province, parang may news po na binato daw po yung mga bahay, binato yung bahay kung saan may nag-positive. So talagang nagkaroon po ng stigma with respect to this COVID-19 nung nailabas or nung voluntarily nilabas nila yung COVID-19 status nila as a positive or suspect or probable. So talagang nagkaroon po ng dilemma dito or gray area ba siya, kailangan ba natin ilabas yung mga pangalan, etc. So, ang ano po talaga namin, nag-joint statement na po ang NPC and DOH na syempre po, meron nga pong batas, yung Notifiable Diseases Law. So, yung mga ospital, yung mga LGUs, kapag nalaman nila na positive yung isang tao, syempre, because of testing, kailangan nilang i-report yun, kailangan nilang mag-notify sa proper authorities. So, ganun din po yung mga employers, halimbawa, na nagpapatest ng employees nila, kailangan yung i-report yun. Kung ang schools nagtetest or mga banks or mga telcos or any business entity na tinetest nyo yung mga employees nyo tapos nag-positive, so ang mag-govern talaga doon is kailangan nyo mag-notify kasi notifiable disease nga po ang COVID. So, ang sinabi po namin doon, kailangan sundin yung Notifiable Diseases Law. The COVID-19 patients dapat magsabi din sila ng totoo. Hindi pwedeng nagsisinungaling sa mga travel history sa mga contacts, etc. And ang inurong po namin doon, syempre, hindi siya policy na nagdi-disclose tayo ng patient identity. Kasi nga po, it has been proven na nadi-discriminate yung mga tao, nagkakaroon ng stigma, nagkakaroon ng physical harm sa kanila kapag nilalabas sa public yung mga identities nila. At hindi naman po talaga nakakatulong yun. Hindi ko din ma-imagine kung bakit. Halimbawa, ako po, sabihin nyo na positive ako, kung sakali lang mag-announce ako, it doesn't really help. Sino? Hindi naman, halimbawa po yung cashier sa grocery, hindi naman niya ako kilala. So, kumbaga parang hindi naman nila malalaman kung yung nakatabi nila sa bus or yung nakasama nila sa pila sa grocery, kung mag-announce po ng mga pangalan. So, it doesn't really help probably with contact tracing. It's different kasi kung public figure na yung tao. So, may ibang rules po or may ibang mag-govern po doon. So, ito po ang stand ng DOH and NPC. It's against any form of public disclosure of personal data that has proven to cause a real risk of severe harm to our patients. With respect naman po dun sa supplemental guidelines, JMC po ng DTI and DOLE on the prevention and control of COVID sa workplaces, nag-issue po sila ng bago. Very recent lang, I think this month lang po ito. So nagbigay na po sila nag-update po yata sila ng health declaration form. Tapos meron na pong mga data privacy meron provision silang binigay na data collected should only include those which are necessary or proportional for contact tracing. Dapat transparent tayo when we collect the data. Sabihin natin kung bakit kino-collect. Tapos ito po yung bago po ito, 30 days lang iso-store yung personal data collected. So kailangan na siyang i-dispose after. So meron din pong bagong contact tracing forms for customers naman po and visitors. Yung nauna is for employees. So ayan po, yun din po, may retention period din po na 30 days. Kasi may mga narinig po kami or may mga na-receive kaming news na parang it would seem that certain persons were contacted because of the forms na iniwan sa restaurant or iniwan sa bangko, iniwan sa mga certain business establishments. Pero hindi siya, kinontak siya for some other purpose. Hindi for contact tracing. So medyo nabahala po yung komisyon, nabahala din po yung DTI and DOLE, kaya po siguro nagkaroon ng updates on their JMC. Ito po yung mga forms na sinasabi ko, naka-annex po siya dun sa JMC. So we've also issued opinions relating to COVID-19 and contact tracing. Yun po, sabi po namin doon, the government agencies involved in the response, siguro si DOH, yung mga authorized ni DOH, and any other agency or entity authorized by law. So ang expectation sa kanila when they process for contact tracing, syempre nag-adhere pa din sa general data privacy principles. Nag-implement ng safeguards and they uphold data subjects' rights. Hindi naman po kasi hadlang or the Data Privacy Act is not a hindrance to the COVID-19 response. Pwede pong gawin ng lahat ng government agencies yung functions niya in this pandemic while we still guarantee data privacy rights of the individuals. Hindi naman po, ina-allow naman po na mag-issue ng aggregate health information or pseudonymized or anonymized data. So, yun na, but the general public will not be kept in the dark as to the contact tracing efforts since this aggregate data can be made available to the public. So ito, may nagtanong din po nung public disclosure ng information ng beneficiaries. Kasi di ba po meron pong mga binigay na mga ayuda ang gobyerno. So meron pong NGOs na nagtatanong to monitor po kung saan napunta yung public funds. Yun po yung reason nila for asking for this information. Sabi namin na yes, it could be disclosed kasi yung constitutional right to information tsaka yung right to privacy, those are two important rights, two essential human rights that feature prominently in society and in a democracy. So complementary po yung rights na yon. So yun nga lang, kailangan nating tingnan kung ano lang yung pwedeng i-disclose or ano yung dapat, the mere minimum na pwede nating i-disclose. We reiterate that releasing sensitive personal information may be excessive. So i-evaluate talaga siya case to case kung ano yung pwedeng ibigay sa public with respect to the information ng mga beneficiaries ng government programs. On work from home, ito po yung sa aming updated na frequently asked questions. Can employers monitor employees through the installation of monitoring software? So, pwede po. Pero syempre, titingnan din po natin, babalansihin natin yung rights ng employer vis-a-vis yung rights ng employees. Syempre, employers, in exercising their legitimate interest, pwede po silang mag-monitor ng employees to make sure na talagang ginagawa yung trabaho. Pero yun nga po, kailangan maging transparent. Sabihin nyo na meron tayong monitoring tool. I-install natin yan dun sa company-issued computer halimbawa. Pero dapat i-assess natin kung proportional ba siya. Meron po kasing before nagtanong kung pwede daw bang mayat-maya isi-screenshot yung computer screen or meron mag-i-install ng keylogger, yung kung ano yung tinype ng employee, i-record niya. So baka medyo intrusive na yung masyado yung mga ganong klaseng monitoring software. So titingnan natin or i-assess natin yung proportionality ng monitoring and yung objective niya. I think yun na po pala yung aking last slide. So if you have questions po, we can discuss po, may open forum po ata tayo after. So thank you very much po.
So thank you so much, Attorney Ivy. This has been very enlightening. Before we proceed with the questions that you have posted in the chat box, may we request everyone to turn on their video so that we can take a group photo just to capture our attendance for today. That's all right.
Open lang po. Good afternoon. Ready? Okay. Ready na po? 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay. Next page po. Can you open, please? Sir Patrick, usog konti, di makita. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Smile. Next, please. Sila Virginia, wala po. Sir Victor Ke, can you open? Ma'am Nat. Okay, thank you po. Ma'am Vicky, thank you.
Okay, so we can proceed with the question and answer portion. There was a question, first of all, on the recording. So the session is being recorded. I think they will share the recording either on, through the separate emails or on Facebook. I'm not sure. So let's go through with the questions. On the prevention, also I've grouped some of the questions here. On the prevention, how can we prevent selling or sharing of our personal pictures and data? So, that's one of the questions. Maybe Attorney Ivy could.
Yes, Attorney Vicky, yung how we can prevent. Ang ano po kasi ngayon, skin-scrape po siya from the social media sites. So, kung talagang meron po tayong social media accounts, may Facebook, Instagram, pag nabasa niyo po yung terms and conditions doon, it's possible talaga na nasi-share siya. Hindi lang po baka sa mga third parties or merong mga, halimbawa po yung nangyari sa Cambridge Analytica. So yun po, talagang aware lang tayo na pag nag-share tayo sa social media, there's really a risk na makukuha yan ng mga nakakakita nun or even yung mga hindi natin alam na nag-access kasi may mga ano na po kasi ngayon. Yes. So talagang I mean, sarili na po natin yon na ingat, kumbaga. Kasi
Okay.
hindi talaga
So
natin siya...
it's sharing the least or not
Yes.
sharing at all. Kung sakali
Opo.
pictures lang, walang background ng bahay, ng number
Yes.
ng bahay or
Yes,
something.
meron po kasing may nabasa din po akong article in other jurisdictions, yung kaka-selfie mo around your house, tapos nabuo na nila yung buong bahay mo. So, nagagamit po yun ng mga masasama ang loob, tapos biglang nag-post ka na, I'm going on vacation. So, biglang alam nila na walang tao dun sa bahay mo at alam nila kung ano yung laman. So, parang may ganun na pong software halimbawa. So, medyo dangerous talaga. So, ingat lang talaga when we post online.
Okay. And then, is there any website where can we get materials or modules or assessments that can be used to educate our people, let's say employees or our family members about data privacy?
Yes po, Attorney Vicky, sa sa website po namin, privacy.gov.ph, madami po doon mga materials, madaming templates on privacy impact assessment, halimbawa, guidance din po on employers, guidance on any business entity processing personal data. Nandun po, nandun po siya yata sa other resources na tab, sa our services, tapos may other resources, pwede po doon mag-visit.
Okay. And then you mentioned that, you mentioned the obligations or what the data privacy officer or the DPO in the companies do. But is there any qualification of a data privacy officer? Meron bang accreditation yan? Do they need to take an exam or a learning, 40 hours of learning or something like that?
So, nung inisyo po kasi yung advisory in 2017, so medyo wala pa po talagang, kumbaga DPO, Data Protection Officer na Pero very, ngayon po, yung mga tao, meron na po talagang, nag-aaral na din po ng privacy. So, ang NPC, na din po kami, we have the DPO ACE program. Po siya, level 1 and level 2. So, mag-a-attend po kayo nung seminar and then there's a level 1 exam. So parang level 1 certified DPO. Pero hindi naman po siya required talaga. It's more on, kasi kailangan matrain yung isang DPO. So ang minimum qualification sa ngayon is dapat yung i-appoint po natin na data protection officer is very familiar dun sa processing activities ng company. Sana very familiar din po sana with the DPA. Yun po yung minimum natin. Pero if you want to go further, tas i-train po natin yung ating assigned or designated DPO, ipa-attend po natin siya nung aming DPO ACE program.
Program. Okay. So, and then in contracts, so we have standard contracts, right? So there's a question here. Can the Privacy Commission require a separate consent form just for data privacy in terms of contract drafting, ganyan, or can you recommend like a clause that can be included into the contracts?
Opo, pwede namang, hindi naman necessary na separate siya, na separate contract. Pwede pong embedded na siya in your existing contract. So, kung kukuha po talaga ng consent at sure po tayo na consent ang basis, so lalagyan lang din po natin siya ng isang provision po siguro doon in an existing or in a future contract. Not necessary na separate po siya. Hindi naman siya particular as to form. Ang nire-require lang namin, yung consent is evidenced, it's written, or pwedeng electronic. So, kahit nasa existing or kahit nasa naka-embed siya or naka-incorporate siya in another contract, pwede na po.
Okay. So, basta may consent, ibig sabihin they allowed the information. Okay.
At sure po na consent yung proper basis kasi baka kumukuha ng consent pero hindi naman pala yung pinaka-appropriate.
Okay. Okay. So, ito, may mga questions na iba on the, magkakasama sila. How long should a professional retain the records of his or her clients? And how long does the employee have to keep the personal data of its employees? Kunyari, nag-resign na or terminated na. What if the employee has resigned and will the National Privacy Commission or yung agency be a witness to the destruction of those documents?
So yung retention period po kasi Attorney Vicky, it is determined by law. Halimbawa po si BIR, di ba meron po siyang 10-year. Tama po ba? Yung retention period niya. So ganun din po kung merong DOLE rule or merong rule yung particular regulatory agency nyo, SEC man yan or DTI, yun po yung susundin natin na retention period. Tapos after po noon, pwede pa rin po talaga siyang ma-retain. Halimbawa po may existing labor cases. So hanggat hindi natatapos yung labor case, dapat nandyan po yung available po yung data halimbawa or halimbawa po may assessment. So yun po, pwede pong BIR assessment or LGU assessment. Dapat nandun pa rin po, pwede pong ma-retain pa rin yung personal data involved. So, hindi po talaga tayo makaprescribe ng specific na period kasi it would really depend on the use or kung may pending na kaso. So, yun po yung mga factors to consider with respect to retention.
Okay. Right. So, situational naman. No? So, for example, what are my rights if an organization I shared my information with is using it, for a purpose other than. So, ito yung, it's going into the purpose, di ba? Like you said, yung sa contact tracing, ang purpose really is for contact tracing, tapos kinokontact ka for something else na nagma-marketing na sa'yo. So, kunyari, I shared my information, tas alam ko na yung organization na yun mismo is using it to send me various solicitations. Anong gagawin? Should I notify the commission or anong gagawin ng commission if I notify?
Okay po. So, as a data subject, you have the right to object. Halimbawa nga, yung processing halimbawa is based on consent. Tapos ayaw mo nang maka-receive. So, pwede mo mag-unsubscribe halimbawa. May mga ganong options dun sa iba eh. Or pwede mo talagang sabihin, please stop sending itong mga materials na ito sa akin kasi ayoko nang maka-receive halimbawa. So, pwede po yun, right to object, i-exercise natin. For example naman,
kung ayaw nilang tumigil.
Pwede na po mag-complain. So yung ganun po, pwede po mag-complain sa NPC. Kasi ang inirespect po kasi parang ayusin muna, parang magkaroon muna ng settlement. Pero pag hindi talaga nagkasundo at makulit si PIC, yung ating controller, yung business, tas hindi pa rin sumusunod, ayaw pa rin dun sa right to object, or halimbawa, yun nga po gumamit for an unauthorized purpose, dapat contact tracing lang, pero nag-send ng marketing materials. So yun po, pwede pong ireklamo yun sa NPC, magpa-file po ng complaint sa aming Complaints and Investigation Division.
Okay. So I guess that answers, can we revoke the previous consent given? We can,
pwede.
because especially if it's being used for another purpose.
Yes.
So on the employer side naman, like there's a question, if the company, how will the company be liable if the employee, kunyari, a trusted employee steals the data of a particular client, tapos may ginawang illegal with that data or shinare sa competitor, ganyan. And in the same manner, what if yung student list ay nahack from the register of the school and a lot of data was unlawfully disclosed? Should the school be liable because they did not follow the protocol or they did not install security measures?
Yung liability po under the DPA, so if it's kapag ang involved is an entity, a juridical entity, so titingnan po kung sino yung involved talaga within the organization. So kung sino yung through their gross negligence allowed yung disclosure, or through their gross negligence na-post siya somewhere na hindi naman dapat siya for public disclosure. So yun po ang magiging liable. Yung particular person na po yun, kung sino po yung naging responsible with the release halimbawa, or yung kung sino po yung gumamit illegally ng personal data.
Okay, so it's not really let's say the school or the company per se. It can be pinpointed to an individual.
To a particular person. Pero titingnan din po yung kabuuan. Baka naman nga, as mentioned, Attorney Vicky, hindi sinunod yung policies sa loob. So baka it's possible na may lapses inside na hindi nasunod yung mga existing policies on access. So, titingnan din po kung meron pong negligence yung company.
Baka hindi nag-appoint ng data privacy, data protection officer, mang ganyan. Okay. Okay, so what other government agencies does the NPC collaborate with? So, meron ba tayong collaboration sa SEC or let's say sa NBI, mga ganyan? Ano ba yung internal workings and communications just so we know kung sakaling worst case scenario ang mangyari.
Opo. So, previously, we've had discussions with the SEC kasi nga kailangan merong data protection officer, diba po ba? So, ang ginawa po namin, kung pwede siyang isama sa GIS, it's an entry there na pwedeng merong, diba, hiningi po natin kung sino yung president, sino yung officers, sino yung corporate secretary, baka pwedeng na magkaroon ng entry on data protection officer. So, ongoing pa po yung talks doon. Also, meron din po mga coordination din po, I think, with kapag hindi pa po kami nakakasama actually with the NBI, pero may existing agreement or may existing talks to enter into agreement with respect po dyan sa Data Privacy Act vis-a-vis baka violation ng cybercrime. So yun po. Tsaka dahil po ang Data Privacy Act ay governing din or covering din data processing ng government, madalas po talaga ang usapan ng NPC with other government agencies with respect to their own privacy compliance.
Kunyari SSS,
PhilHealth,
PhilHealth,
BIR, yan po. Madami pong madalas po silang magtanong ng mga opinions, etc.
Okay. And then, so ito nga, in case of a data breach, what are the powers of the commission? What will they do and how will the guilty parties be penalized?
So pag may personal data breach, ni-report po, tapos na nalaman or naisipan ng NPC na parang mas magandang i-further investigate po ito. So yun po, magkakaroon po ng formal investigation, titingnan po yung nangyari. Very similar po doon sa COMELEC, ganun po siya. Dahil na-breach nga po yung COMELEC website noon, so nagkaroon po ng hearing, ng investigation, nagkaroon po ng decision yung NPC. So ang decision po doon is to prosecute po ang recommendation sa DOJ to prosecute po for violation ng DPA si Chairman Bautista at that time. So hanggang ngayon po pending po yung kaso na yun, nasa Court of Appeals po ata siya. So ganun po yung takbo.
Okay, sige. So nagmamaterialize siya upon investigation, pwede siyang maging court case talaga.
Yes, apo.
Okay. So I guess so what can government do about private entities that are asking customers to waive their rights? So talagang siguro ang mangyayari doon, the government cannot do it, but we should not waive our rights, diba?
Kasi under naman po sa civil code, rights may be waived. Pero syempre po, yun nga po, parang dapat yung waiver is not contrary to law at very aware po kung ano yung wini-waive nating rights. Usually po yung mga ganong clauses na we waive our data privacy rights, baka contrary po to law yun. Kasi bakit ka nagpapa-waive? Baka waive yung right lang to be informed. Halimbawa, baka may specific ka lang right na dapat wini-waive, but not all data privacy rights.
So in any case, we can refuse to waive, di ba? We can refuse to give our consent. Okay? And then, meron bang penalties if a company will not appoint a data privacy officer, data protection officer?
So as of ngayon, wala po talaga siyang specific penalty na amount na DPO non-appointment. Pero it will be taken into consideration po in case there's a breach, in case somebody complains, yun nga po, or in case there's a compliance check. May compliance check po kasi ang NPC, may audit function ng NPC. So, factor to consider po siya kung walang DPO. Pero ngayon po, may talks po with, may existing or ongoing study with the UP Law Center on admin fines. So, isa po yan dun sa posibleng magkaroon ng administrative fines kapag walang data protection officer. Pero ano pa po yun, pending pa po.
Okay, not finalized. So also, kung like in terms of confidential informant, is there a reward for an individual who, yung parang like in the BIR, meron bang ganon na if I have knowledge, for example, that the entity is using the information illegally source, tapos using it for another purpose or sharing data without consent, meron bang ganon?
Wala po. At out of the goodness of your heart ka na lang mag-inform. Pero wala po kami nung informer's reward. Pero magandang suggestion po yan. I-raise
parang BIR din, di ba?
Yes, yes.
So, on the COVID side, what do you think of retail establishment asking customers to write their personal information like name, contact number, and address?
Opo eh. It's na yung requirement po kasi na yun, nandun po siya sa yun nga po yung JMC ng DTI and DOLE. So they require it for contact tracing. So, well, we're not really sure kung nagagamit po ba talaga siya sa contact tracing. And si DOH, wala din naman po kasing sinasabi kung, useful po ba talaga siya or si DILG. Pero nandun po yung requirement na yon, and until masabi po ng isang proper court na hindi valid yung JMC na yon, we have to follow po. And by the nonetheless naman po, 30 days lang yung retention. So, ang expectation is within 30 days na naisulat mo yun, madidispose siya properly.
Yeah, I've also encountered that some do not use the logbooks or the pens. Parang they use a QR code. Tapos, so hopefully that also gets erased, diba?
Yes,
kasi
dapat
parang,
po. Yes. Kung ano man pong form ang ginamit nila, whether online siya or yun nga paper form, dapat within 30 days, masisecurely delete siya or madedestroy po siya.
Okay, so the other questions here that are new in the chat box. What is the minimum required information we can share? Is there a minimum or
so for businesses, wala po eh. It depends talaga po dun sa use or sa purpose nyo or sa purpose ng ka-share nyo. Kayo po ang magde-determine nun. So you just have to make sure na proportional yung sharing, tapos covered po siya. If appropriate, covered po siya ng data sharing agreement. Yun po yung
Okay, and then another question, if there's a breach or possible breach identified, will the entity be automatically liable and penalized? So, naano na natin, individual.
Po, pwede na, pag naman po finalo lahat ng, hindi naman po kasalanang na breach ka. Ang kasalanan is naging negligent ka halimbawa. So, if you did everything, tas na-breach ka pa din, ganun po talaga kasi ngayon, na yung mga hackers, na din sila, alam na din nila kung sophisticated na din po.
Okay. Can we have a standard for data collection when answering online so we can check or approve normal usage of data but disapprove marketing and other third-party questions? Sometimes they are vague or hard to understand. Also, data for operations and use for marketing should be clearly separate. Sometimes there's a tick box if you want to receive marketing.
Yes, ganun po. Ganun po yung ideal, ganun po yung best practice na lahat po ng hihingan natin ng consent, kung magkakaiba po ng purpose, separate tick boxes sana siya. Kasi dapat consent should be as granular as possible. Kasi
directed, di ba?
Hindi pwedeng nakalump siya dun sa iisang, tapos di naman naintindihan na nung nagbabasa kung ano yung ina-accept niya.
Ang liit kasi ng print eh.
Oo nga po eh.
So, in a multi-company setup, can we just have one DPO?
It's possible po.
Are they allowed, are companies allowed to outsource the data protection officer?
Yung po sa group of companies, pwedeng may common DPO. Pero ang expectation yata, meron siyang separate email for all the entities. Parang ganun yata kasi sinisendan ng email notification yata. Pero yung halimbawa po, yung DPO dapat internal siya. Pwede, opo. Pero yung functions niya, yun po yung pwedeng i-outsource. Syempre hindi naman natin na-expect na lahat yun kayang gawin ng isang tao lang. So it's possible na naka-outsource po yung iba. Yung paggawa halimbawa po ng privacy impact assessment.
Okay. And then, what document can we execute to protect us from liability in case of breach by subcontractor? Processing the data we collected. Siguro, depending on the contract lang, diba?
Opo, yung the usual na dapat covered may outsourcing agreement. Tapos, under the IRR, meron po dong mga ine-expect na laman ng isang outsourcing agreement. So, pwede po natin i-check na lang po yun. Section 44 po siya.
Okay, so it's in the law. So we can check the law, what we should include in the contractual arrangement.
Yes.
Okay. HMO is sending bill to the company but no details as to what medical checkup was undertaken by the employee. Can the employer request the medical checkup details?
I think may opinion na po kami dyan on HMO. Nire-recall ko po, parang kung posible pong i-request nyo na po siya directly dun sa employee nyo. Kasi just to make sure talagang siya yung nag-avail at kung covered ba talaga yon ng coverage po ng insurance. parang ganun po yung naging discussion dun sa opinion. Pero I can check po sa aming database po ng opinions.
Okay, so I think we've covered all of the questions that we had today. Thank you so much for joining. And maybe we can flash the seminar that's coming up next on Saturday. So we will have a seminar next Saturday on the Interagency Task Force or IATF guidelines on delivery of goods. So thank you so much, Attorney Ivy, for sharing with us. So I hope that all of your questions have been answered. As stated, so this is still, a work in progress for our National Privacy Commission, and any inputs that, coming from business would be very valuable. If you have any, comments that have not been put into the chat box, please feel free to share, and then we can forward that to Attorney Ivy. So thank you again. We're 4 minutes ahead. So maybe we can have some closing remarks from one of the officers, Miss Mylene. Would you like to have some closing remarks? Sorry to put on the spot, but just to close it, because we have a couple of minutes.
I'm volunteering VP Gerald to do the closing remarks. Go ahead, VP Gerald. VP Gerald is our main proponent for our webinars. I am under him.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
On behalf of the CFBCI, we would like to thank our resource speaker, Attorney Ivy, our moderator, Attorney Vicky, then all of the participants, attendees for today's webinar. We hope this topic enlightened everyone and gave you some guide on how to protect your personal data, and also how you would protect your customers and your members' data. So like a mutual respect for each other. So again, thank you very much, and have a nice day, safety, and good health to everyone. Thank you.
So thank you. That ends our session for today. Keep safe, everyone, and have a good weekend. Bye.